Welcome to the Superintendent's Roundtable. Today I have with me the steering committee from the high school that worked many hours on the NEASC report. I'd like to introduce Lisa Alves, the chair of the committee, Principal Larry Birdie, Assistant Principal Tom Landers, and teacher Janice Ponta-Coloni. So we have an exciting agenda today as we learn more about NEASC, what it is, how the high school got accredited, and what work remains. So I'm going to start by asking, what is the NEASC process? And Lisa, since you were the chair, would you mind delving into that question?
Every 10 years they come and reevaluate us in order to see if we meet their criteria so that we can retain our accreditation. And there are 7 standards that they have created that they measure us against. And they are core values and beliefs, which is how our report starts, and that states what we believe in at LHS and what we want our students and our teachers and our staff to do. There's also instruction, curriculum, assessment that has to do with our teaching. And there are also things that involve the community. Community resources for learning, school resources for learning, and school culture and leadership. And what NEASC provides us with are guiding questions and criteria that we measure ourselves against. So during the whole self-study process, which was an 18-month process, our teachers work on committees. Each committee has co-chairs, and they follow these questions, they collect data, they get all the evidence to show how we're meeting the certain standards. And then we put together the reports, and the steering committee, which is Janice, Rita Hawker, Meredith Laughlin, Tom, Larry, and I, we look at everything that they've written, we put one report together with one voice, and then that gets sent to the visiting committee, which is a team of 16 teachers, administrators, superintendent, assistant superintendent that come and visit, and they have read the report prior to coming. They go through our school, they shadow our students, they meet with all stakeholders. They met with you, they met with the school committee, they meet with groups of parents, they shadow students through their classes, they go to lunch with students, they talk to everyone they can, and they decide if we are meeting what we've said that we are. The self-study lets us look at ourselves and decide where we need to improve.
And so I know that people talked about the core values and the mission statement, and I know, Larry, that was something that you really focused on because you felt that NEASC was particularly interested. Can you talk to us a little bit about the core values and how you developed them and why you think they're important?
Well, this whole process is a 10-year cycle, as Lisa had mentioned. And what's important for the community and the school to realize is that it's a professional development opportunity in terms of where we want our school to be. So when you ask a question about the core values or what's important to us, as a community we have to make those decisions. For example, we want it to be an inclusive program where students not only have academic preparation, but they're also involved in extracurricular activities, that there's an athletic program. Music and arts are important to us. Contributions to our community. We have service clubs. We have clubs that will work in the community. And so when we think about all those different kinds of values and learning expectations we have for our students, we have to determine what those are as a faculty. One of the things we always say is the NEAC work is something that we're doing for ourselves. The NEAC is teachers. We're all part of that organization. So one of the reasons you do this is you visited other schools and you get their concepts and what they're doing and you see what fits for you. So we always say we're going to do what makes sense for us. So I don't want to get into great detail about core values, but basically, and to simplify it, comes down to what do we think as a community, what do we think as students and parents is important that happens in our building, and how are we going to go about making sure that that's done efficiently and done well to prepare our students when they leave us. Great. We also, I'd add too on that, is we also want to think about the whole community as once we always talk about this happens at the high school, but it's actually K-12. You know, as superintendent, you set standards, you tell us, we meet as groups and we talk about what's important to the whole district. So we understand what's happening in K-8, the students come here and we want to continue in that process. Okay.
Tom, what do you think some of the interesting points of the NEASC study were?
Well, it's a detailed report and it's long and very in-depth, but some of the things that stood out were some of the commendations that they gave us and some of the recommendations. But certainly we were happy to hear LHS commended in areas of the dynamic between faculty and administration, the student-centered culture of our school, the fact that so many of our students are engaged in multitude of clubs and activities. We were happy to hear that much of the work that we were doing in terms of using rubrics and developing the core values and beliefs that Larry mentioned and the school-wide expectations, that the NEASC committee acknowledged that. They validated that what we're doing is working. They acknowledged that our students are high achieving, not only in academic areas and that there's appropriate rigor and pacing, but that also there's a culture at Long Meadow High School that is positive, generally responds with a yes when we can to the community and the student body, and one of the things that stood out was one of the comments from the NEASC committee was that the moment they walked in the door, they were welcomed and greeted by students, they were welcomed and greeted by faculty members, and that there was clearly a positive dynamic, a positive energy, a positive culture at Long Meadow High School. That's what we seek to achieve, and we were happy to have that validated by the visiting team.
Great.
One of the things that really stood out for us is each of those visiting teams has a chair. Our chair happened to be a superintendent, Dr. Conway from Connecticut, and I think she summed things up for us very well that I think was one of the highlights for our faculty to hear and our students and parents. She used the word expectations about the school. When you talked about values, and asked me that earlier, there's an expectation that the way she described it is most schools have expectations for learning and that the teachers have those expectations and the parents. But what she pointed out was what separates our school and really makes us effective and a nice culture with our students have expectations for themselves. And it was really rewarding for us to hear that our students were recognized. When they walked into the building, they saw kids interacting, kids working hard, kids seeking out their teachers, contributing to the culture of their school, and all members of that team noticed that. So, you know, I think that the kudos need to go to our students. They really were the shining stars of this visit for us.
It is an amazing culture, having worked in several districts. When I walk into the high school, I'm always impressed. There's a student holding the door. If you need directions, they offer to walk you where you're going. So it is amazing. But that leads me to the next question, and I might have my figures wrong on this. Was it 98% of students that reported they had a significant adult in the building to go to or that they had a relationship with?
I'll let Lisa answer that because there was actually a survey that she had conducted through the Endicott study.
Yeah, the Endicott survey has to be done, and it's an outside organization that asks students, parents, and all faculty the same questions about the standards. And our students, 98% of our students said that they had an adult member of the faculty that they felt comfortable going to and talking about academic issues or personal issues, so they had someone to identify with. And that's very important for NEASC to see. They want us to have 100%. So that is one of our recommendations, that we have to somehow get 100% of our students to feel that way. And we do have a program in place, and we are working on it, and we do find that almost all of our students, once we sit down and talk with them, do have several people that they can identify.
That's amazing, because I've seen school statistics where it's only 60%, 70%, and when those numbers come out, people are very impressed. And to have 98% is just unheard of. So.
And the key to that standard was it was other than your guidance counselor. I think that's important to recognize. The students were asked to identify an adult who wasn't their guidance counselor, who, you know, on a natural basis has students come down to see them. So we were pleased that our kids would seek out, you know, the other adults in the building.
That's fabulous. Janice, we talked a little bit about a self-study, but being in the English department, could you give some more detail and explain to people what it was like to be in the self-study in one department and what work you had to do?
Well, we, the English department, in anticipation of our using the rubrics, had already incorporated them into what we do with the essay writing and the portfolios, and so that it was something that was kind of natural to our department. So it worked out pretty well in the sense that we could show them what we were already doing, and it was already what they were looking for. So okay. We used the the rubric, the school-wide rubric, as well as our own writing rubrics for our course rubrics, in assessing essays, and the students use them for self-assessing, and they keep a portfolio and all that already, so it worked out real well.
Do you find that the rubrics help students become better writers?
Definitely, definitely. What we just did, for instance, for the midterm assessment is they had to write an essay and use the school-wide rubric to assess that essay, and then they had to write a 4-paragraph essay going through the rubric and figuring out where it was their essay had strengths and weaknesses, and they were very able to put into words what it was that they need to work on. They know they can look at that rubric and say, yes, it's the specific examples that I'm missing in this essay that I have to include. They could put in writing what their goals for the rest of the year was in terms of trying to improve themselves as writers, but they've gotten so used to using these rubrics all the time that they're pretty good at self-analysis now of their own writing. They know what it is they need to work on.
Many parents ask what a rubric is and why it's important. Can you name the components to your rubric or give us some specific examples?
Yeah, the rubric that we use well, we have different rubrics. We have the department rubrics, which are, say we have one rubric that the freshmen use, and then the freshman honors use the same as the middle level 10th graders, and it's rubrics for different writers, but they're very similar. And then that is also in the school-wide rubric is a little bit simpler version of our kind of complex department rubrics, so that the rubric would have them assess their own essays on insight, on their use of examples to support what they're saying, on their grammar and mechanics and errors in that regard, on their organization and their method of organization and how they're creating, you know, the thesis statements and the topic sentences, how they have transitions in between, and those kinds of things.
How do the rubrics tie into grading? Because I know you have to give a letter grade, but the rubric is a different form of assessment.
Right. Most teachers, well, before recently we used the Collins approach, so that most teachers would choose 3 things that they were going to be looking for, which we call focus corrections. So they might say, for instance, on this particular essay, I'm going to focus on your use of specific examples, your use of clear topic sentences, and your use of transitions. So they might just choose a few key parts of the rubric to assess that essay on, where the kids are focusing on a few key things in their writing instead of trying to take it all in at once. And so that was a good way to do it, and some teachers still do it that way. But they do, all papers have a rubric that they're using before they give them the assignment, so they all know exactly what it is they're supposed to be concentrating on.
I bet that's very helpful.
Oh, yes, it is.
Do all departments have rubrics now after completing the NEASC study?
I would say so, yeah. Well, we have the school-wide rubrics, which all departments use, and then all departments have their own department rubrics, and then sometimes course-specific rubrics. The way we developed the school-wide rubrics was from the department rubrics. And so that we had the course rubrics, they developed department rubrics, and then from the department rubrics we developed the school-wide rubrics, so they're all connected.
Oh, that's great.
The learning expectations you want?
I was just going to say the great thing about rubrics for people at home, rubrics have been certainly required in education for at least the last 15 years, but the great thing about it is it can serve both as a precursor to the assignment, sort of a roadmap. So students and parents know exactly what you need to do to get an A+, an A, a B, a C. So it will guide as a roadmap for the assignment, and it'll also be used on the back end of the assignment to give specific feedback, to say, here's where you achieved the goal, here's where you fell short, here's where you need to make corrections. It provides students and parents detailed feedback rather than just say you got a particular grade. Students, when they use rubrics correctly, there will be no surprises as to why you got the grade that you got.
In terms of using the rubrics, one thing I'll go back to is you had asked about our core values. We established what our values are and what's important to us as a school, and then we developed what were school-wide learning expectations that each of us have for the entire school. And then we got even more specific. Each department then listed departmental learning expectations, what they hope to accomplish in English and foreign language and all the other subjects. And then the rubrics are based off of meeting those in both areas, departmentally and school-wide. And then we're providing students and parents with feedback as to how well their child is doing in that area.
It's excellent. I think that really brings learning to a whole new level when students are so engaged in self-assessing their work. I'm going to digress for a sec. The NEASC report 10 years ago found fault with our building. And so, Larry, can you talk a little bit about what that report said, what was the feedback, and about the new building?
Well, a couple of things. One thing, I think it was clear that NEASC, when they were here 10 years ago, the first thing they started with was that they were here 10 years before that as well, and in 20 years they hadn't seen any improvement. And so we were actually put on warning. We are in danger of losing our accreditation to some extent because of the condition of our building. With that said, you know, I think that's a thing of our past. I'm glad to say that we can hear the construction vehicles outside today when a beautiful new facility is being built. So the NESC was very pleased to see that the community has supported us, that the town has overwhelmingly supported the construction of a new school, and that is happening. And we're very excited about moving in there, certainly for the fall of 13, no later than the fall of 13. So we're already talking about how that educationally that facility will better suit our needs, the kinds of new programs that we might be able to establish, and just having modern academic spaces that things will be, you know, our students will be better served and our teachers will be able to provide better instruction. The one thing, though, in this report, and when you read it, we are still, this kind of process requires that you respond to what they call recommendations, that they expect us to. That's the point of doing this, is they tell you what you're commended in and they tell you what you need to work on. They're still saying that we have to be careful to make sure that this building doesn't deteriorate any further, that during the next year and a half that we're here, that we continue to provide a safe environment, quality air control, you know, good lighting and things like that for our students. So when the public does see this report, and it is a public document, there's copies in Town Hall, there's copies in Storrs Library, one of the things they will say is continue to monitor the condition of your present building. But again, we're trying to just maintain at appropriate levels, and you know, the enthusiasm is getting into that new building.
And part of me wonders if they just needed to come up with recommendations to give you, because the accolades were so strong and they were so impressed with their visit. As you said, I came to meet with the team, and all the sidebar conversations were about how amazing Longmeadow High School is, the relationships, the courses offered, just what a wonderful school it was. And there are teachers as well as administrators from other schools, so they had the background they needed to recognize it's an outstanding school.
One of the things as an administrator that you know, I think would really make us happy in terms of in behalf of the teachers, because the teachers who are truly what makes it happen here with the interaction with their students. It's part of the Sunday visit when they come. They interviewed, was it 30 to 40 parents, and one of the things that they put in the report, which again I'll mention was very rewarding, is they used the phrase that our parents were our biggest cheerleaders. We're the biggest cheerleaders of the teachers that stand in front of their kids each day. So I thought that was great, and you know, a real compliment to our teaching faculty.
That's fabulous. What were some of the other accolades?
I think our support staff and our support services were highlighted, from our school nurse to our librarian to our social worker to our substance abuse coordinator. All of those, in addition to the academics and in addition to the traditional extracurricular activities, the support staff and support services were highlighted. As a matter of fact, as they commended us, they said the only recommendation we would say is advertise even more to the public how much you have here at LHS for student support and family support. That's certainly one thing that we were commended on, and
LEAF was another, which we're very thankful for, but they definitely noticed. We spoke about LEAF a lot because as they would come into our classrooms, the reason we have technology and are doing innovative teaching strategies, and the kids are so involved with their own teaching one another and using our technology, is that LEAF provided us with the means to do that. So they were very impressed that there is a committee that cares that much about education, that they fundraise and provide us with what we need to make education that much better.
LEAF is a phenomenal education foundation, and it's noteworthy the amount of money they give every year, the amount of time the grants committee spends in reviewing grants to make sure that we continue to be innovative and to give us tools that we need to really have excellence in our classrooms. Lisa, what was the most difficult part of this report? I know people dread it when it comes around, and they say it's a monumental task.
It is a huge amount of work. The committees, there are 7 different committees with teachers from every area on it, because we have to mix people up so you don't work with your department members. So that's a good thing, that you get to work with other people. But the work that you have to do in just gathering the information and finding the evidence and supporting what we do is just a huge task to put together the writing. So I think for us, even when we meet, we have to take what they've written and put all that together. So that was huge and takes forever. So that was probably the most labor-intensive and most difficult part.
And then who were the key players that worked on this? So you're the steering committee, but who else was involved in this report and self-study?
Everybody in the building has a part of it, from food services to custodial to the nurses. Each of the committees also has students that were members, parents that were members.
Wow.
You know, even as superintendent, you were required to come and do certain work with us. Again, I'll go back to another commendation, and they mentioned that it was an inclusive process in terms of the support given by not only the community but by the superintendent. One of the commendations was the environment and the resources provided by the school committee through the recommendations of the superintendent to provide us with what we need to make this place what it is. And so all those kinds of things are part of it. So everyone had a piece of this and gave their opinions and help us evaluate how we meet those standards. Otherwise, you know, if it's not inclusive and you don't have all the groups giving input, the continuous improvement process works much better if you do it that way. That we want to hear from people so that when we review the recommendations that we're going to be working on, we can address those.
It is a phenomenal process that people go through, and we do appreciate everyone's involvement in doing it. Doesn't it take a year to do the initial part of the self-study?
It's at least a year and a half.
Year and a half.
We're on the same review cycle as NEASC, so every 10 years when we're being evaluated, they've also just changed all of their processes. So we're usually the guinea pigs, and it's huge. So we only had 18 months because they needed to get all their documents in order before we could have them.
Larry always tells me not to do this, but I understand he received several accolades in the report, and I was told not to bring that up.
As was I, surprisingly enough.
But maybe you could address that?
Absolutely. It was throughout the report, and it's very rare to see a principal cited so many times for the wonderful things that he does and how he leads us, which he hates to listen to, and we were both warned. But it was throughout the report that we have such strong leadership, and he is a man without an ego. And to have a leader without an ego is so rare, but so necessary for anything, for school, for business, for whatever, because he steps aside. He leads us, and he steps aside and wants us to take the credit for everything, as you can see, because all he's mentioned is the teachers and the students and the community. But we wouldn't teach the way that we do, the kids wouldn't react the way that we do if it weren't for our leadership. And they said so many wonderful things about him and our leadership team and his relationship with teachers, with the other leaders, with the superintendent, with the school committee. And when you go to other schools, you don't find those things.
That's right.
So it's a very rare quality, and I think it's one of the major things that makes LHS what it is.
Lisa's trying to get tomorrow off.
I don't think so. It really is, and the research shows that there are 2 major factors in students succeeding and excelling. The first is the teachers, and then the second is the leadership. So we can't underestimate Larry's leadership and Tom's leadership because it plays a significant role. And we appreciate your modesty, but also people should know that about the both of you.
Thank you.
So, all right, so what are the next steps?
Well, we have a big report due August 1st. We just received this letter in the middle of December, so we don't have a lot of time to put together the highlighted recommendations. They always categorize the recommendations, and we have different reports due on different dates. And then once we do a report, we get a request for another report following that up. So it's going to be 10 years of constant reports.
Wow.
But the first part is due August 1st, so we have to address several major issues. And it's not necessarily that there are things that we didn't know had to happen. It's just, again, it's going to be a large amount of work, takes a lot of time. We have to start new programs and evaluate and see where we go. So we'll be doing that for August 1st. And then the next, after that, if we don't get any other special reports, which we will be in 2 years, which is November of 2013. That report will be due. And then after that, we have the 5-year report. And by the 5-year report, they expect all of the recommendations that they've given us to be complete and everything be in effect.
The nice part about it, though, is I'll go back to an earlier comment that we have such again, a talented faculty in terms of we do what makes sense for us. You are allowed to write to the recommendation in terms of what you think works for your school. So we'll go back to this, to these recommendations and say, how does this work for us? How are we going to proceed? What do you think we should do to make improvement? As we said, it's a professional development, all about improving instruction and curriculum. So our teachers will tell us, and we'll report back to the NAC, thank you for pointing it out. We would like to improve in this area, and this is how we're going to do it. So we'll make the decisions on how to proceed.
Excellent.
Which I think is important to acknowledge.
Excellent. Speaking of new courses, Janice came to school committee last night with Susan, Bailey, and Larry, and you're offering 2 new courses, and they sound phenomenal. Is this part of the NEASC report, or is this just part of continuous improvement?
I think that's pretty much part of continuous improvement. In the fact, too, I know in the English we were talking about the new frameworks that recently were adopted by the state. That sort of affects things also. But it's as Susan Bailey was saying last night, we hear from the students too what they want, and they were talking to their department about wanting the environmental science and that kind of thing. So it sort of comes from a lot of different places.
So that's great. So you get student input and develop courses, as well as you're responding to what the state and the Common Core asks us to do.
Absolutely.
The number of courses offered at the high school, it's truly amazing. Do you know offhand how many?
Oh, I don't. The hundreds. I mean, I know we have, for example, 18 to 20 AP courses.
Wow.
You know, those some of the things that we happen. I will say with the NEAC, our teachers were challenged the last time around to develop science electives for seniors.
That's true.
Because we have so many students that take 4 years of science, math. It's a unique school where kids want to take all those things. So we've created many senior electives in science. So again, that's an example of how this process can work for you. They came in and said, we heard from your students, we looked at your curriculum. We're guessing that you have kids who would take a lot more science in the 12th grade if you offered those courses. You heard about 2 of those last night. In the physics of sports and the physics of music. 2 new courses added next year as part of that process to add electives.
It's absolutely amazing. Well, we're running out of time. I'd like to thank the panel of the steering committee for coming in and talking to us. I also just want to summarize by saying Longmeadow High School is an exceptional high school, and that's part of the reason we wanted this team to come together to talk a little bit about the work that's going on, and so that you can understand some of the detail about what's going on that makes the school so special. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time on the Superintendent's Roundtable.